Hello friends, for today's video I wanted to do a tier ranking of all of the various different things that I got around to in 2024. This is going to be specifically things that could be discussed here on this channel. I'm not obviously going to be talking about things that are book related, as all book related things are discussed over on my main channel, and this list would be much longer if we were incorporating all the books I read as well. Instead, this is going to be talking about TV shows I watched, anime, manga, video games, movies, those sorts of things. And I have to say, this was a very successful year for me, as there were so many things that I checked out that I absolutely loved. And because I was just mentioning the book things, I have found that fantasy is kind of in a weird place, fantasy books and the genre as a whole. It's kind of really transforming and shifting, and I think that there are a lot of things I checked out that I adored, but a lot of the things I checked out that I adored were actually backlist works. And as a result, I felt kind of lukewarm on a lot of the newer things that I was checking out. But I feel something that contributed to that feeling was just how good the things were that I checked out here on Full Meta Analysis. And something that I love about what I get to do is that in talking about fantasy books, but also having a love and a passion for storytelling in all its forms, is I really think it showcases how good stories can be across different mediums. And it also, at the same time, kind of a con, is it in some ways can make you pickier about certain things. That said, we'll go ahead and jump into the tier ranking for today. Just one little thing I want to mention. I did watch a lot of various different films from Studio Ghibli, but I am just going to kind of think of Studio Ghibli as one entity to be ranked today. In the future, and especially probably this year, 2025, I will do more Studio Ghibli content and maybe even tier ranking all the films. So we're not going to do that today, but if you are interested in hearing more about my thoughts and the discussions we've had, I'll have my playlist linked, and also be on the lookout because there will be more content moving forward. For the bottom three tiers, I currently have one thing in each of those tiers. Almost everything is in the second tier or the first tier. The only thing I put in those three tiers, there's one thing in each of them at the bottom. I want to also add that it could just be where I am at in these, as I have not completed them, and I wouldn't say I've even gotten very far into them, so my feelings for these could change. So really there was nothing that I despise that I checked out. And the first thing that goes in the bottom tier would be Tokyo Ghoul, and specifically the volume that I had last picked up. I really didn't care for. It actually made me, for a while, DNF the series. Some of you have highly recommended that I continue, and some of you that happen to have very similar tastes to me, and a lot of your input as to why I should keep going has encouraged me to do so. I might not for a little bit, don't know exactly when I'll get back into it, but I do plan to continue on with it. Just that one volume, I really found myself quite irritated by, and I felt like it kind of took away a lot of my excitement for the story, and it was coming off of a very good volume. So I put it down, but I think I'll keep going. And really, honestly, given that the other volumes that I've checked out I actually kind of liked, this is truly a temporary DNF. Plan to come back to it, and it feels like it doesn't even really belong in this tier. It's just, of all the things, relatively speaking, it is the lowest of everything on this list, but I would by no means say that this is a terrible story, or that volume was, honestly, I wouldn't even say that volume was terrible. I just think it's not as good as everything else that we're talking about today. The second to last tier. I mentioned this in my Game of the Year awards discussion, that this particular thing it's very much, I think, that I haven't given it a fair go. I tried it, I was impressed initially, then I got bored, then I was annoyed, and then I stopped playing, and that would be Black Myth Wukong. And I know, I probably just need to push through and try more of it, and hopefully there will be more variety in the gameplay, in the surroundings, in the combat, but I was finding that it was already feeling repetitive, and that I wasn't enjoying the navigation of it. And just to be clear, it's not because it's difficult, because I do not shy away from challenging games. I really like challenging games, but I was just unimpressed. But I think I probably just have to spend some time away from it, come back to it, start fresh, and plan on giving it a lot more time. And then hopefully I'll come back and I'll be like, oh yeah, never mind, this is really good. I lied a second ago. I said there was only one thing in the third tier, but I did technically start something at the very end of 2024, and I would technically put it here for now. So the two things, one would be Tekken 8, and I've always been a fan of Tekken since I was a kid. The nostalgia is really what got me and made me want to pick it back up, and I tried this new one. It was fun, but, you know, it's not anything exceptional for me. It's really, truly, I think, epitomizing being in the middle of a tier ranking. And then Metaphor ReFantazio, I have tried it, and I've played a little bit of it, and I definitely think I just need to give it a lot more time because I gotta give it the opportunity to build, to get to know these characters, to also really get to see how the gameplay is going to expand, because currently it's not that exciting or interesting. I do like the art style, especially during cutscenes, or I should say the more formal cutscenes. The ones that are kind of just within gameplay are more of the gameplay style. But I also have to say, though, something I don't love, and maybe it's just a stylistic thing, it's very busy. It's kind of chaotic looking during gameplay. There's a lot on the screen. And I prefer it to look a little cleaner and crisper. I don't love when it looks too chaotic. And yes, it's pretty, like the font is pretty that they've chosen for the text and things like that, but I'm like, ugh, there's just so much. Can we trim some things? That's a very specific criticism. Anyway, it's only, I think, in the middle for now. I have high hopes that this will be bumped up to second tier, and then maybe, if I really love it, it'll be bumped up to first. I'll add, I also currently don't understand how it beat Final Fantasy VII Rebirth in the Game Awards for RPG. I think 7 is better, but we'll see. I have to keep going, and then maybe I'll disagree with that statement. Now moving into the second tier. There are a couple of things that I have almost like asterisks toward in my mind, and those would specifically be Spy Family and Witch Hat. I love both of these so much. However, I'm specifically referring to the last volumes that I checked out, and those were not necessarily individually, I think, top tier. Both of these stories, I think, for me, are top tier. However, those last volumes, just by themselves, I would say, are in this tier. They're both great, but Spy Family, I feel the volume before was exceptional. One of my favorite volumes. And this next one was sort of like, okay, now we're gonna be silly again, which I love the silliness, and I think Spy Family is so funny. I probably laugh at Spy Family the most frequently of most of the manga that I pick up, except for maybe Full Metal Alchemist. I do love Full Metal. But anyway, it doesn't matter. That's not on today's list. But those two are still, even though they're not top tier individually for those volumes. I would say the series are, but these volumes are in this second tier. After that, we have Astrobot. I was a hater at first because I was like, what is this game that beat all these other games? You know, I was one of those people. And I'm like, okay, I haven't even played it. Don't be that person. Go play the game. See for yourself. And it was fun. It was definitely really fun. I found that it was quirky and silly and definitely a good time. And it had some challenges, I think, from one, I'm going to call them planets. From one planet to the next, they had different ways to play. You kind of had to learn from one planet to the next, which I enjoyed. And I also, it was those stupid, I call them the button puzzles, the ones that are like the triangle puzzles and the X puzzles. Those were so fun. And then the Great Master Challenge was a blast. I have done it a few different times now, and I try to do it in different outfits. So I've done it as a skeleton, I've done it in the Santa outfit, and the little Santa planet around Christmas was very cute. I've done it in no fancy outfits, and then I've done it in the Bloodborne outfit. So my goal is just like keep doing it in the different outfits, and I don't get tired of it. And you know what it actually made me excited about is I did that again last night. And then I was like, now I want to watch the Shine Spark puzzles again from Metroid Dread. And then I watched those, which I've done them all before. But now I'm like, now I just want to play Metroid Dread again. So anyway, I enjoyed Astrobot quite a bit. Do I think it is top tier? No. It's absolutely a lot of fun to play. I wish it was more challenging more frequently. And I mean, the story is, you know, you kind of pick up bits and pieces of it. It's silly. It's just whatever you need to get to all these different planets. Serviceable. But I don't have emotions really while playing that game the same way I do for things like, you know, Ghost of Tsushima and stuff like that. So it's a lot of fun. I don't know if it's a favorite of all time, however. Next up, we have Frieren, Beyond Journey's End. Had a lot of fun with Frieren. I understand why it's so loved and so hyped right now. I think that its biggest plus and a little bit con is that it is such a love letter to the fantasy genre that as a result, if you're extremely familiar with fantasy, is a lot to provide comfort and familiarity and feel very cozy. However, certain aspects of the story aren't the most unique. And also there are certain things that you're like, yeah, I've kind of, it's not just that it's not the most unique in how it initially starts. The thing that makes that story shine is what it does with a familiar setting, except for sometimes, occasionally, it doesn't actually do that much that differently from other things, or I'll even add, sometimes in having something very similar to other works, it actually highlights when maybe something else has done a certain thing better. For example, the idea of the demons in that story. And are they actually good? Are they actually bad? Are they evil? Or is it just like their instincts, the same way animals have certain instincts? That concept is actually explored phenomenally in the Winnowing Flame trilogy, which is one of my favorite trilogies of all time. And then so as a result, I'm like, oh yeah, it's definitely really good. It's maybe, though, that aspect isn't quite as good as it is in that other series, or certain parts of the story feel very similar to certain RPGs I've checked out. However, it's obviously still in this the second tier. It's not in the fourth tier. It's in the second tier for a reason. It is a great story. I love the characters. Stark is my favorite. I love him. It's quirky and it's fun and the humor is well timed and I like the jokes. I like the jokes that they choose to be recurring jokes. And I just, in general, really appreciate the themes in this story. I really, really enjoy this one. I was just more so talking about the other aspects to explain why it's in the second tier and not the top tier. Some other things. Apothecary Diaries. I almost put this in the top tier just because I had so much fun with it. I had so much fun with Apothecary Diaries. And Mao Mao is probably one of my absolute favorite characters of anything ever. I love her so much, and I think that she is a big draw for a lot of people who come to Apothecary Diaries. I found the humor to be so over the top and ridiculous, but it always got me. And also, it's great at the anticipation when you are expecting a joke to happen and that buildup makes you feel kind of giddy. And then when the jokes happen, then you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know. It was just a really fun time. I really loved it. I can't wait for season 2. Avatar, The Last Airbender. This one also almost went in top tier. But when I look, here's the problem, okay? The problem is I watched Attack on Titan in 2024, and I'm like, this is better than everything. At least in my opinion. I'm one of those people now that's obsessed with Attack on Titan. So it was really difficult for me to put literally anything. I feel like Attack on Titan just needed its own tier, and I'm like, I can't put everything in the second tier. But anyway, Avatar: The Last Airbender was so fun. I completely understand all of the nostalgia that people have for this. I had never really watched it growing up, ever. I had heard people talk about Zuko, but I didn't really know anything in Uncle Iroh. And I love Uncle Iroh, and I love Zuko, and I just love the characters in this too, just in general. Aang as a protagonist could very easily have become so boring of a protagonist, just being like that perfect chosen one character that's just good all the time, and instead they really took the time to make him flawed in his own ways. Sokka was flawed. You see tremendous character growth for them. You see tremendous character growth for everyone. It has a great redemption arc. It has the wise old mentor, but like even they have a past that you understand why they are the way they are now because of their youth. Anyway, I absolutely understand all the love and nostalgia for it. I think that where I am in my life, obviously I'm not the target demographic necessarily, which is not to say that adults cannot still love and appreciate that show. It's just that a lot of what pulls at my emotions aren't quite the things that I think a lot of what Avatar is doing. That's not quite what it is that gets me. I don't know. I'm like, do I just put it in the top? And I'm like, ugh, but it doesn't quite reach those levels for me. Vinland Saga. I love Vinland Saga. I've loved Vinland Saga for years. I only, though, have gone through a certain amount within 2024, and so I'm just looking at that amount, and that amount currently is in the second tier. Pluto is in the second tier. This one I almost considered putting in the third tier, But I'm like, no, I quite like it. I still need to finish it. I'm not quite done. But this one, actually similar to Frieren, it utilizes a familiar foundation to build itself upon, and then it deviates in compelling ways. However, sometimes it just leans into basically being cliche. But it's very good, and I like the animation. I like the way that the story, you're constantly like, what the heck's going on now? Who's that? Who's this person? Why, how is that connected to this? What is Pluto? That whole feeling that you get while watching, I think it accomplishes that very well. And then there's some moments where you're like, no, what? No. Even sometimes when you know they're coming. But the first episode, the second half of the first episode was phenomenal. I feel like for that reason alone, it deserves. That little arc on its own is top tier. But I don't know if there's been an arc so far that has topped it necessarily. But that arc is great. It's so good. And then Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, very good. All the nostalgia, certainly, for this game. And I had a blast with it. It does so many things so well. It does so many things, though, I will say. And I'm not necessarily opposed to that, but it's just, there's a lot to do. And they really utilized all sorts of different kinds of gameplay and nods to other games, which I absolutely loved. I have said before, they've added extra things to the story that I still don't really know how I feel about those things, but I still feel like this deserves a place quite high up. If you can't tell, I'm not ranking these things within their given tiers. That we would be here all day if I did that. Witcher 3, The Wild Hunt. I think currently the only reason this is in this tier, this is a replay for me, and I have not gotten that far in. I'm past White Orchard. I'm in the next area. And I've managed to get into, I don't think it's Oxenfurt. What's the other big city early on? Doesn't matter. The point is, I've just kind of been doing my thing, which is with Witcher, it's like, what's over here at this question mark? What's this question mark? What's this question mark? It's a lot of that. And then a lot of like, oh yeah, I remember this quest. I think I'm supposed to do this. And that's been fun, certainly. But I feel like the meat of the story and when it gets really, really exceptional, it's a great game in general, but I do feel like the story and the really kind of elongated quests, side quests that turn into almost main quests in their own way, you have to give more time for those things to not only show up, but to actually continue on. Like the Bloody Baron, I'm still doing that quest again. And I'm trying to make sure I'm like, what's the best outcome for this quest? There's really not a great one. But if you know, you know, it can very easily be absolutely trash if you don't make very good decisions or if you leave out certain parts of the quest. So I'm trying to get the best case scenario. Anyway, my point is I'm not that far in my replay of this, but it's still great. If I had played through all of it, I'm sure it'd be top tier. But for just the amount I played in 2024, it's in this tier. Stellar Blade. Okay. So yes, I loved this game, okay? I loved it because the gameplay, the combat specifically, is so satisfying. It is great combat. It is great combat, except, unless they fixed it, when I beat it, the stupid, like, the gun that you occasionally have, especially in the last couple fights, you have to shoot certain things, and I had to change the controls a little bit to ensure, I also had to change the controls so that it automatically picks stuff up. I'm like, why would you make us manually pick it up? Did anybody else have this problem? Doesn't matter. Anyway, so the shooting of things, the aim is terrible. So I had to change like the timing of it because you cannot get through certain things if you don't get good at that. You gotta get good. Otherwise, though, the combat is sensational and it's so satisfying and it's so fun. The literal navigation of stupid Eve, though, is at times so bad. There are times where she goes, especially in those areas where you have to jump and you have to cross over stuff and then you have to grab onto something. It's not very crisp. And there's a part, I actually saved it. I might be too lazy to put it in today to this video, but I actually saved an example. So sometimes when you're trying to get to harder to reach places so that you can get all the cans, so that you can get her nightie basically as an outfit. But anyway, so in trying to get all the cans, you're in that one desert area and there's this ladder. Every other game, if you go down a ladder all the way, but there's not ground beneath you, right? You go down to the end of the ladder, and if the idea is then you have to like jump from there and grab onto a rope or something like that. If you go all the way down the ladder, they stop at the end. And this dumb character, it's not her fault, it's the people that made the game, but she just slides off, and you're like, what are you doing? No, I obviously didn't want you to slide to your death, you idiot. I mean, you did it in a very sexy fashion, but no, don't die. So anyway, stuff like that, where I'm like, it adds up. There's so many little things that add up. Also, I'll add, when you do go to shoot your gun in that game, am I allowed to do that motion in this and on YouTube? I don't know if I am. When you go to pew pew, you know, I'm sorry, your butt doesn't jiggle that much. I know people love to be like, the jiggle physics are really realistic. No, they're not. No, they're not. They're not realistic. And the fact that there's even a conversation about it, I'm just like, this is dumb. This is silly. Anyway, but the combat. It's so good. The combat is so fun. Anyway, as soon as I beat it, I was like, I want to replay it. And then also, then you get like new colors for the outfits, and it's satisfying, I'm not gonna lie. I'm just like, oh, this one's fun in this color and it looks good with her hair in this color. And it's not okay. The equivalent for another character in a different game is Arthur Morgan in Red Dead Redemption 2. Do all of you know this? There's an entire subreddit dedicated to dressing up Arthur Morgan. What is it that dressing up these characters scratches something in our brain? And I'm not even referring to the obvious reason why people want Eve to be in certain outfits. I'm not referring to that. I am specifically referring to like, this outfit's cool. And then accessorizing. Why is that so satisfying for us? I don't know. Does somebody know? Has somebody done a paper on it or something? What a bizarre thesis that would be. But I need somebody in gaming who's trying to write a paper on like the psychological reasons why we do that. Anyway is the key word for today, because I'm going off on a lot of tangents. I had a few sound issues for this next part, so I'm just going to go ahead and do a quick little voiceover. Ancient Magus' Bride, I read through the entire first major arc of this story, and while I do think it feels very much like it's a collection of short stories almost, what the main arc's themes were, I thought were really well done, and I also really appreciated the themes themselves. It's a lot about trying to understand your own worth, your own value, seeing why life is worth living. And it's also doing so through two protagonists. The main protagonist, more so, though, is recognizing that despite all of what they've experienced and all they've endured, that there are still so many experiences in life that they feel are enriching and valuable, and then there are people in their life that they care about very much. So it's just kind of recognizing the value in themselves and people around them. And then the other protagonist is somebody who is a creature, basically, and they're trying to learn what it is to have emotions and to understand others, and the way that these two come together and help one another toward those thematic elements, I thought was really beautifully crafted. The also short story elements to this, I really was impressed. There were some that took me by surprise with just how much they made me feel in such a short amount of time. Very, very, very early on, everything with the dragons I thought was so exceptional, but there were just so many instances of a single panel or even just a page of a couple of panels or a single thing of dialogue really elicited the "aw" kind of reaction from me, and for that I felt it was deserving of being in this second tier. It is a little chaotic and a little all over the place. It's probably the only reason it's keeping it from being a little higher. I am curious to keep going at some point, but where we've ended after that first arc, I think is a really nice place to stop for now. And then the other things that are going to be taking us into the next tier, we have, staying with the last thing for tier 2, we have season 2 of Arcane, and then in the top tier, we have season 1. I love Arcane so much. I absolutely adore it. I think a more realistic portrayal of my thoughts would be to get down to individual episodes or even individual scenes and tier rank those, because I feel it's almost too much of a blanket statement to put all of season 2 in tier 2 and all of season 1 in tier 1. But just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to go ahead and do that here. I do think as a whole, maybe season 1 was stronger.
And season 2 was still very fantastic, but I think I would have maybe wanted a few things elaborated on a little bit more. Either way, I absolutely love this show. I love what it's done for animation. I love what it's done for people's perception of what animation can be and the kinds of stories it can tell. It really, rewatching it as well, both the first season, now for the third time I've watched it, and then jumping into season 2, it just goes to show how much they really pay attention to the small details and the way they foreshadow and the way they incorporate the characters in very nuanced ways and their struggles. I just appreciate this show so much. I absolutely love it. So that's why it kind of is a blend of both top and second tier.
I already revealed Attack on Titan's here. It's the best thing ever. I love it. Oh my gosh, is it so good? And then everything else. So let's talk about everything else in this tier. I still continue to play Ghost of Tsushima because it's fun. I mostly just play the Legends mode with my friends and my husband. And I know for everything else in this discussion, when I am only tier ranking a piece of something, for example, like one single volume of a manga, I'm trying to think of just that volume and then tier ranking that. So does Legends mode deserve to be at the top? Probably not, but I don't care because it's so fun to play with my friends, and it's not just fun because of my friends or because of my husband. It's also just fun. There's not too many things I play online with other people that I have that much fun with. I always come back to it. It's such a good time. I love it. I am putting Shadow of the Erdtree here because I'm being, once again, inconsistent. Do I think Shadow of the Erdtree belongs in isolation in top tier? I don't know, but I restarted Elden Ring again, so I guess Elden Ring / Shadow of the Erdtree. I'm putting it all up here, and I'm thinking of it as one thing. But I did restart recently, and immediately I'm like, I have to defeat Melania. I've got to defeat Melania. That's my main goal, was to get to her and kill her. Because I'm not gonna lie, I changed how I play. I used to never use a shield ever. I was that person that was rolling around constantly. Have you seen that clip somebody took of a raccoon rolling around and it's like what it's like playing Elden Ring? That was me. That was how I played because I am more melee. I don't use magic in that game. My husband uses magic, and then to make fun of me, he's always like, I think being a magic user is actually way harder, because he's heard me before be like, must be so easy to just shoot everything from far away. Anyway, I never used a shield, back to what I was saying. And then, for spoiler reasons, I won't say who the final boss of Shadow of the Erdtree is, but I was like, dude, I can't do it. I need a shield. And then I started using a shield, and then I beat that final boss, and I'm like, what would it be like to go back and try to fight every boss with a shield? And the answer is very easy. The game's not hard with a shield, I gotta say. I mean, I am way over leveled, and I'm aware of it, but it's much easier. But she's still difficult because even if you block with a shield, she still gets her health back. So then I was wondering, okay, well, is she gonna be hard though? And it took me a couple tries, but she was much easier this time around. Elden Ring is top. Studio Ghibli, I'm putting at the top. For Princess Mononoke alone, but also just the music from Ghibli movies, I feel like for that, it deserves to be up here. Are there some that are misses that I checked out in 2024? I mean, just the one. What's it called? Luna just yawned. The ham one. What is it? Where she comes from the ocean. Whatever, that Ponyo. I don't like Ponyo. That's the only one really, though, that I think I've just actively been like, I don't like this. Everything else was probably primarily second or first tier. They would probably go in these two slots anyway. Maybe there's a couple that would be third. But we watched really good ones in 2024, so Studio Ghibli, top tier, absolutely love. They make great, great movies. Last for today, I have not at any point talked about this show here on this channel, but I've watched everything that's out of it so far. I was a little unsure at first, and I was like, I don't know. It might be a little pretentious, actually. And then I kept watching. I'm like, never mind. This is one of my favorite shows I've ever watched. It's not animated. It's got real people. It's not fantasy. It's everyday life. And that would be The Bear. This is about, on surface level, it's about a young man who is he's a very successful chef, and then something happens in his family. And this particular family member had run this little, almost like mom and pop shop, and he takes it over and he's trying to turn it around and make sure it's holding on, but it turns out his family had a lot of debt, and so he's just trying to stay afloat. And doesn't sound like that's the most unique premise. It doesn't sound like maybe it's that interesting, but the acting in that show is absolutely phenomenal. I now have two new favorite actors from watching that because their performances are unbelievable. Everybody's performances are great in that. And they do not mind letting you just sort of sit in a scene in a way I really feel a lot of other shows don't do. It's almost like they trust you to find human interactions fascinating and interesting, and they aren't afraid to allow those slower, quieter moments to actually show development of characters. And it feels like so often now everything's so flashy and so big, and everything's meant to entertain constantly, every second, every moment. And this just lets things play out. A good example is there's a scene between a character who is trying to learn more about being a pastry chef and who he's learning from. At the end of the day, they're just kind of doing something with dough. I don't know the specifics of the chef parts of what they're doing oftentimes, but they are just talking. They're just getting to know each other. And you're like, yeah, nothing really happened. They just talked for that scene, but it's one of my favorite scenes. Everything with the character Richie is perfect. I mean, I love the exploration of that character. I haven't found too many stories that take the time to just show human beings being human beings and how they can affect each other for good and for bad. It's great. Absolutely love it. It's well shot. It's everything I just said. It's a fantastic show. So I thought it deserved to be up here, even though it might not be everybody's cup of tea, especially for the kinds of stuff we usually talk about on this channel. Even though it's not really related to any of those other things, if you are somebody who's open to checking out a new show that's not fantasy in any fashion or sci-fi or anything like that, I do think this one, the hype that it has, I think it deserves it. That's it though for a tier ranking of what I got around to in 2024. A very, very, very good year for this channel and the stories that we checked out. I can't wait for 2025, as I think we're gonna hopefully continue to check out a lot of really fantastic stories. Let me know what were some of your favorite things from the year. What were some standouts for you? If you have more thoughts about anything I mentioned or any recommendations, feel free to leave those. I hope you have a great rest of your day though, and I'll see you later. Bye.